Two. Okay, now we're gonna hit record and we are going to start in three, two. Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. As you know, this podcast is all about
Mhm.
thinking like an entrepreneur. And one aspect is being a leader, right? If you can lead yourself and lead others, you can accomplish a lot. You can get that vision of yours out into the world and change the environment around you. And this individual is in the world of leadership, has been hanging around people like John C. Maxwell. We're a big fan of his. So it is an honor to have our guest who has written many books, but one we're talking about today called The Eight Paradoxes of Great Leadership, embracing the conflicting demands of today's workplace. And thank you so much for being here, sir. Tim Elmore.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be with you.
Well, let's start off with the genesis of this book. Now, it seems
Yeah.
like you have many, and there are a few that are very relevant to this podcast. So we'll talk about those. But leadership in general, what made you want to sit down and write this book? I think this one came out in 2021.
Yeah, it did. I think the big idea that really sparked the book was talking to entrepreneurs and business leaders everywhere, and almost every one of them saying something like this: Man, leading today is different than it was when I first started my career, or it's just harder today. And of course, you can think, well, we're a bunch of wimps today, maybe, but I don't think it's just that. I think it is a more complicated ordeal to lead people. I think people come in with a greater sense of agency and empowerment, and we will take a stand for this or that or whatever. We
Yep.
politicize the workplace sometimes, and we go, I didn't plan on this being a political place. So the story that I always tell behind this book, Mike, is this. I was in a green room right before an event. There were 16 of us backstage getting ready to launch this event. And I thought, oh my gosh, this could be a focus group right here. So I got everybody's attention and I said, do you all believe that leading people today at work is harder than it was when you first began to lead? Kind of like what I just told you. And I thought I'd get a mix of answers because I had male and female, old and young, single and married. But every single one of those people that were about to speak at this leadership conference said, absolutely, it's harder today.
Wow.
And I pushed back because I thought, well, wouldn't you think it'd be harder way back in the day when you didn't know much about leadership and you were
Mhm.
trying to lead? But they all stuck to their guns. And that started me on a hunt. What is it today? And so there's a myriad of answers, but let me wrap up this comment by saying I began to see that the best leaders, the best entrepreneurs, as they launch a venture, practice paradoxes, almost two opposite ideas at the same time. So they're confident and humble. They leverage their vision and their blind spots. And when we're able to balance these two seemingly opposing ideas, we tend to succeed with more people and sell more goods and services. So that's the premise behind the book.
I love it. Yeah, and I think that the moment I started to abide by Jim Rohn's philosophy, work harder on yourself than you do
Yeah.
your business, that's when things start to evolve in your favor. And I realized that I was, um, I was such a driver within my startup in 2016, 2017,
Yeah.
that I just felt that anybody who joined my team, you better have a work ethic that compares to
Yeah.
mine, and you better care as much as me, and you better try as hard as me and solve the problems just like me, when that's impossible, right? So when I
Yeah.
started to
Yeah.
realize that everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses, and I needed to evolve as a leader, not only for them to trust me, but for me to
Yeah.
have the patience and ability to help them in the way that they need helped.
Yeah.
It was like, all right, I need to fix me first. And that's what
Yeah.
made me a great leader. I'm assuming personal development is such a hot topic nowadays as compared to back in the 50s or 40s,
Yeah.
that most people don't even think about. Like, they didn't have the rich dad poor dads back in the day. They
Yeah.
didn't have
Yeah.
Think and Grow
Yeah.
Riches. So maybe there's such an involvement in personal development, and maybe empowerment, like you said, in this culture, that you really need to be a better leader now than before, because
That's
maybe the
right.
expectations are so high. Is that right?
Yeah, when I first started my career, it was a very top-down style. 40 or 50 years ago, and I'm old right now, but you could get by with just being a top-down leader, try to be benevolent, but it's you in charge. Now it's team leadership, and it's much more. Adam Grant, the social scientist at Penn, says we've experienced the democratization of the workforce. So it really is, ooh, I better be a better leader. So, Mike, check this out. The report card I've given myself with my team is I imagine that every single one of my paid staff were volunteers. How would I lead them if they didn't get it? Well, I'd be much more relational. I'd be much more encouraging. I'd be much more empowering. I mean, think about that. And that's how we ought to be. Now, do they get a paycheck? Well, they ought to.
Yep.
But if I'll lead as if it's all based on relationship and vision, they buy into the idea, then they want to run with me. Now I'm just going to get a lot better results out of the team that I lead.
Oh man, it's a great way to put it, right? They're
Yeah,
here because they're volunteering and it's
yeah,
something they
yeah,
love to do. So how
yeah.
do you speak to them? What's the Zoom calls like, right? Like,
Yeah,
what's the feeling whenever we get together and we solve problems? How would I talk to them is as if they're here
yeah,
without
yeah.
expectation of money? My God, that's a game changer. And
It
so
really, it's been
yeah,
good for me.
so I realized that, and maybe there's studies out there, you probably point out a few in the book, but I think most people are taking their jobs based off of maybe the schedule that they have, whether the purpose that's behind the career, rather than just the money. And maybe
Yeah,
that has changed over the past 30 years, where it used to be about going for just money.
yeah,
Now it's like, all
yeah,
right, do I believe in the vision? Do I believe in the cause behind the vision? Do I believe in the leader? There's a
yeah.
lot to it. And I think money is just one variable, not the variable. Is that right?
Absolutely. In fact, what I often just say when I do events on eight paradoxes, I'll say it's meaning as well as money that they really want. That's the remuneration. So I want a job that feels meaningful. I want to feel like the company I work for makes a difference in the community, changes the world in some way. And I know that sounds cliche and idealistic, but this is what Gen Z is wanting. This is what millennials are wanting by and large. So I want to go back to what you rhetorically asked Mike just a minute ago. You were kind of just saying, man, how do we lead in this way? I have found myself at the later stages of my career practicing an acronym that I have so fallen in love with. You know how for years and years we've used this phrase, this is a leg you got to stand on?
Yeah.
And I take the letters A leg, ALEG, and it informs how I approach, let's say, a 25-year-old new team member. The letter A reminds me, instead of telling, I need to start with asking. So I want to tell them something. I'm the boss after all, and they've just done something wrong for Pete's sake. I need to correct them. Well, instead of just correcting, I need to start with, tell me what your thinking was behind that decision, or what were your, what was your rationale? Those kinds of things. When I ask questions, people tend to feel valued. Think about it. You feel valued when people ask you about you.
Yep.
The letter L, listen well. It does little good to ask questions unless I'm willing to pay the price to actually listen to them. When I listen, they feel heard. This is the number one item that Gen Z is asking for from supervisors. I want to be heard. I want my voice to be heard. Okay. So I ask, they feel valued. I listen, they feel heard. The letter E, empathize. Now, this was not on the radar 40 years ago when I started my career, but to really communicate in some way, I understand, or, ooh, I bet that made you feel awful when that happened, or I had no idea. Now they feel understood. And once I've done ask, listen, and empathize, the letter G reminds me now I've earned the right to guide, which is what I wanted to do in the first place as the
Right.
boss, as the leader. I'm telling you, if I win them at the heart level through relationship like that, I'm going to have them at the heart level, not just the wallet level, or I'll do the bare minimum and leave at 5. And I do, Mike, I love what you said. I want them to have that work ethic. I expect that from you, but I'm going to win it from you by getting to know you.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Well, it really hit home with a conversation that I had with one of my first, actually, she was my first hire. She was a photographer, then she became my assistant, then she became my project manager. And I had a conversation with her about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. And something really, messy happened within the company where we kind of fumbled the ball with a bestseller push for one of our clients,
Yeah.
and we were able to fix it. But I had a hard conversation with her, and she said something to me. She goes, "You have no idea how much meaning and purpose this job gives my life." that
Wow.
phrase, and I almost broke down in tears because I'm like,
Yeah.
that's it. It's
Yeah.
working, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what I want to hear more than anything else because
Yeah.
it it I think it sunk in when she became responsible for others. Now, here's
Yeah.
the big thing. You can't give everybody
Yeah.
responsibility over other people, but the
Yeah.
moment they become a manager or a leader, it's almost as if they become a better follower. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where they
Yes.
start to realize how much communication really matters, how much they pay attention, but now they're in charge of other people's lives.
Yeah.
So, uh, it all connected right then and there. And I thought to myself, here it is. I think the solution is give people more responsibility right out of the
Mm.
gate rather than less. Let them learn, let them
Yep.
fail fast, just like I
Yep.
did,
Yep.
because they're able to see it from the other angle, from me speaking to them way faster, which is going to create this cohesiveness.
Yeah.
So not only was there more responsibility and more purpose and meaning, there was a better understanding of the full picture by giving them
Yeah.
more responsibility. So is that one of your recipe or ingredients to your success? Is that, hey, sometimes people come in, rather than try to hold them back from progressing, let them run as fast as far as they possibly can, and then when they fail, they will start to see what is required. Is that anything that you discussed?
Absolutely. I could not have said it better. Here's the research behind what you just said. Way back in 1954, 70 years ago, Dr. Julian Rotter was a psychologist at Ohio State University, and he developed a scale, a test that measured whether you're an internal locus of control person or an external locus of control. You probably remember that from Psych 101 class in college. So internal
I don't
locus,
remember that, but
okay,
I probably
okay.
wasn't paying attention.
Well, let me give you the Reader's Digest version of what that means. He would test graduates on whether they were internal or external. If you're an internal locus of control person, you're what you just said. You own your life. You own what's been given to you. You take responsibility. It's what every boss wants. It's what every parent wants in
Yeah.
their children. You own that exam you're about to take. You own that practice on the soccer field, son, that sort of thing. If you're internal, excuse me, yeah, if you're external locus of control, you somehow look outside. Someone else, fate or external circumstances are responsible for the outcomes of my life. So now you're a person that's looking outside. Well, if my boss would have just, if my mother would have only, if my girlfriend would have just, and of course, that goes south really fast because now your whole life is up to the victories of other people. Here's why I share this. Over the last 60 to 70 years, there's been an increase in young people entering the workforce with an external locus. I think they come in overwhelmed. I think they're overloaded with information, from that smartphone. And so they're looking outside. And when you, as a leader, say, I'm going to give you ownership of this, it's yours, honey. You go, you run with it, baby. Well, now they're going to make a couple mistakes,
Hmm.
but you never see somebody with greater buy-in than when it's their deal. So one more quick story. Um, it was the 1940s that instant cake mixes, this is going to sound really random, stay with me, that instant cake mixes hit the marketplace. Betty Crocker cake mix. And Duncan Hines and Betty Crocker and so forth thought, oh my gosh, this is going to sell like crazy. Well, it didn't sell like crazy. People were still doing it from scratch, eggs and milk and flour and sugar. They were still doing all the labor. And so they did a series of focus groups with people in the 1950s asking, mostly housewives, why you weren't buying this instant cake mix. And you know what they found out?
Hmm.
They said, it doesn't feel like our cake. All you added at the beginning was water. Add water and stir. It was this powder. You add water and you
No
stir.
pride. No pride.
Yeah, that's right. So you know what they did? You know this. You now add the eggs and the water, and the sales took off once I added one ingredient. It's the principle of human beings need to own what they're doing. And we, entrepreneurs, when we started this baby, we want to control it. And I'm telling you, I know you want to control it, but the best thing you can do is empower fellow owners, people that have that ownership mindset. And that's, of course, what I'm trying to do with the 8 paradoxes of great leadership. Yeah.
Wow, it makes me think of that stat or that quote, whatever it is, but it basically says if you have the idea that you know is going to be the solution, but the person that you give that idea to only gives about 50% of their effort, it
Mhm.
will actually be worse off than
Yeah.
if you allow them to give you their solution and it's
Yeah.
only 80% of the way
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But if it's their idea and their baby, they will put 100% into it,
Yeah. It's
ultimately
so true.
giving you the greatest return.
No doubt about it. You just said that so well. And we have to relearn it and relearn it. So listeners, I don't know what you're thinking, but I have to relearn this lesson and I'm over 40 years in my career, but I'm telling you, it's just human nature and good leaders understand this behavioral science
Oh,
about people.
and the one thing that you said before, it made me think of an old Indian proverb, I believe it is, and it's basically the Indian speaking to his grandson about
Yeah.
two voices in your head. And he said to the
Yeah.
grandson, he said, you probably have heard this, but in every young man, there are two wolves. There's
Mhm.
one wolf who's full of jealousy and anger and hatred. And there's
Yeah.
another wolf that's full of light and excitement and
Yeah.
enthusiasm. And the
Yeah.
young boy asked the grandfather, well, which one wins?
Yeah.
If they're going to fight, which one wins? And the grandfather says, the one you feed. All right.
Yeah.
Now
That's
that
right.
means, how does this tie into leadership? Every action has a reaction. So imagine somebody coming to the table with an idea and you turn it down. And then you
Yeah.
turn it down again. And then you turn it down again. They come to you, they're going to stop coming up with ideas
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's no return on that idea,
Yeah.
which means
It's true.
everything you do is being watched, is being, analyzed.
Yeah.
And so they are going to respond accordingly. So if you don't give people the responsibility, or if you do certain things in a certain way, they're going to evolve. And that's why
Yeah.
if somebody comes to the company with an idea, I say, give it a shot. If it's not going to
Yeah.
destroy the company,
Yeah.
if it's not going to hurt the
That's right.
client, give it a shot, right? I
Mhm.
want to feed that wolf
Yeah.
inside them that allows
That's
them
right.
to just keep going. Is that something you preach also?
No doubt about it. In fact, I actually tell that story in one of our habitudes. We teach leadership with imagery. Habitudes are images that form leadership habits and attitudes. We call it the starving baker. Most entrepreneurs and most leaders fall prey to the starving baker syndrome. We're the bakers that spend so much time baking bread for others, we forget to eat and we starve ourselves. School teachers, they fall prey to this. Leaders fall prey. So it goes back to that personal development thing, Mike, you brought up. We've got to first feed ourselves before we turn around and try to do something for the workplace. And you need to do something for the workplace, but I better go in full, not empty. So that's exactly right.
Now, you've had an interesting career. Obviously, you've been on stages with John Maxwell, the GOAT in this
Yeah,
sphere.
yeah,
Tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get into this love of leadership?
yeah, yeah. Well, it goes back. I keep mentioning 40 years. I don't know why I do, but I went on staff with John right out of college in 1983. So I had just graduated. I had met him, and he said to me, "Once you graduate, would you be willing to come on staff with me?" And I said, yeah, you know." So he wasn't really famous yet, but I could tell, man, this guy's worth following for sure. So in my 20s, I'm learning from this master. And while he wasn't perfect, I learned timeless principles. And I felt like I didn't have to unlearn a lot of bad habits because I started good ones right
Wow.
out of
Yeah.
college.
Yeah.
So fast forward, I worked for him for 20 years. And along the way, I had already fallen in love with the next generation. I'd worked primarily with emerging leaders while John was talking to established leaders. And I started in 2003, I started growing leaders, which was to do for the next gen what John was doing for the present gen. So I was taking young professionals, university students. We work with a lot of sports clubs, that are usually made up of young players. And we teach leadership, we teach emotional intelligence, and I'm having a blast. But it was really the foundation that I laid with John Maxwell, and he was the first one to bless the nonprofit that I started. He was the first one to write a check and say, go do it. So we've recently merged our organizations after 20 years. John approached me a couple of years ago and said, what do you think about getting together again? You are the next gen expert for the young generation, and I'll be the older guy. He's 77 now. And so we've had a blast just merging forces again and seeing what happens.
I watched a video, I think it was about 2 years ago, of him talking about the importance of writing, and I shared it
Yeah.
out with my friends because I always say, writing
Yeah.
is an internal there's an internal gain just as much as an external gain. And so you
Mhm.
find out more about yourself, there's self-awareness, but where you come from, where you're at now, where you're going.
Mhm.
And once you know it, the world sees it, right?
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
the opportunities come your way. And I remember him saying something along the lines of he wrote multiple books before anybody knew who he was, but
Yeah.
that's what made him that great communicator, because just by
Yeah.
getting started in writing when nobody was listening, people think that's a downfall. That's not. That's actually a
Mhm.
benefit, right? Start
Yeah.
to write and get clear before the world knows about you, but it
Yeah.
does open doors to the new life that you're pursuing. So
No doubt about it. You've hit the nail on the head for sure.
is there anything that he taught you that really just strikes a chord? Maybe it's something that you preach on a day-to-day basis, or something that
Yeah.
you will never leave. I'm sure there are many things, but is there one
Yeah.
above all?
There are a bunch, but actually, let me list two real quick. Two come to mind. I created the habit in 1985 under John Maxwell's leadership about personal growth. So every January, first month of the year, I sit down and take an completely day alone in solitude. I'll review the last year, as many people do, but then I'll look ahead and I'll ask myself, what areas do I want to grow in this next year? Well, this year, like always, I pick about 5 or 6 areas. I picked 6 areas this year, and then I begin to choose conferences I'm going to attend, mentors I'm going to ask to meet with me, magazine articles I'm going to read, um, just books I'm going to read. I read 2 books a month, and I pick those books based on these are the areas that I want to grow in. So it's not a random reading of books. I'm in my lane. I'm in my lane. Communication, leadership, negotiation, those kinds of things. So personal growth. I want to avoid being a starving baker.
Mm.
The other big lesson, Mike, I would say under John was the art of confrontation. I think most human beings, even if they're leaders, don't love confronting. They don't love the conflict that comes with it. We avoid those conversations, blah, blah, blah. John showed me what it meant to have a backbone and meet with people that were troublesome or that were missing the mark or that were poisoning the culture, maybe unintentionally, but they were. And he had me sit in. I'm 24 years old at the time. He had me sit in and watch him deal with those issues. And I watched a strong leader not back down. Now, he was very loving, he's very gracious, but to use one of our Habitude images, he was a velvet brick, velvet on the outside, brick on the inside.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, learning to confront. If you can manage that or master that, I think you can do almost anything in leadership because that's the hard part of it. Anybody can lead on a good day. Just love everybody, they'll love you back. We're all making money. But to be able to confront something that's gone awry was just a critical lesson. So those were my two
Oh,
biggies, or my
those are
top two
great.
biggies.
Is there
Yeah,
basically a switch that you have to turn on and off at some time, or at some points? Because, like you said, there's a certain version of you that is
yeah,
presented to the world when things are going right, but your true character is exposed when things go wrong, in my
yeah,
opinion.
yeah,
And so, do you have to be able to be the ally, the friend, the mentor,
yeah,
but
yeah,
also be the mentor that says, "Wait a second, what you just
yeah,
did was absolutely wrong, and it's not
yeah,
tolerated here. So we
yeah.
need to fix that." But also do it in a way that allows them to redeem themselves. I guess, is that probably the best way to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, here's what I had to learn over time. I've learned it isn't two different people, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. He was nice to me now. Oh, he's not nice to me now. One of my core values is begin with belief. So if I'm believing in people, even though they're going to let you down, I find that wins more than it loses. Now, let's say there's been a time a team member really messed up. And like you just said, they did not practice what we're trying to do. I can still begin with belief, but I say something like this. I'm offering this hard feedback because I have high expectations of you and I know you can reach them. Now, do you see how that's belief, but yet it's still pressing? It's getting them psyched up to have a hard conversation.
Yes.
So you don't change fundamentally, but you do set them up for, I got to give you a hard conversation, but I'm going to have our conversation because I believe in you. I'm not going to let you be a lesser version of yourself on Tuesday because it was hard. So yeah, that's what I think is the best way to do this.
Man, I just love the aspect of leadership because it transcends business, right? When you get on a
Yeah, it really does.
podcast, you're a better communicator. Whenever
Yep.
you're out with your family or friends, you maybe have a different presence, a tonality,
Yeah.
an energy
Yeah.
that's given off, right?
It's
And
true.
I think that's undeniable at a certain point. Wherever you go, leadership qualities start
Yeah.
to protrude from you, I guess. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it does begin with self-leadership, but then leadership becomes who you are, not just what you do. I want to be a good leader for my family, for my wife, for the friends in the neighborhood that may just need a little input or encouragement or whatever. I'm reading the people before I'm leading the people, and then I'm offering what they need. But I'm hoping that leadership really does become it's who I am. Yeah.
Mhm. Now, you did say something about the daily solitude or the day
Yeah.
solitude of
Yeah.
January every year, you said, right?
Yep. Yep.
Now, I have a question for you because I've been doing this myself where I start to analyze what are 3 to 5 things that I want to adjust or have a
Yeah.
chess move and maybe progress my life. And I will tell you, there is a battle in my mind that says, do I need to hit 10, 20, 30% more money revenue?
Yeah.
Or do I
Yeah.
need to fix some things in my business first? Do I need to
Yeah.
invest in my team? Do I need to invest in
Yeah.
software? Do I need to do more podcasts? And so I put together a list of like, okay, well, rather than invest in masterminds this year, I wanted to invest in my team. And
Yeah.
rather than do X, Y, and Z events, I need to do more podcasts. So those really are not tied directly to revenue, but I
Yeah.
battle with that. Have
Yeah.
you ever noticed that you get around people and they're like, yeah, you got to do 20, 30, 40%
Yeah.
more top line revenue this year, or it's going to be a failure? Or do you look at it as saying, you know what? I analyzed my business and myself and I see all these weaknesses. And if money comes from it, great, but that will be priority 5 rather than priority 1.
Yeah. It's a great question you ask, and there always seems to be a right answer, like a Sunday school answer that ought to be given. But I actually have come to believe that when I tend to the internal growth, the internal personal stuff, the money tends to follow. I know that's a hard statement for some of you listening because you go, wait, don't you need money to live? You do. But one of my chapters in the 8 paradoxes of great leadership, by the way, every chapter is based on a case study of a leader. So one of the paradoxes is I believe brilliant leaders are both stubborn and open minded. Isn't that a great one?
Oh man, yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. And then isn't it true when you think about you? I was stubborn and I was open minded, depending on the category.
Yeah,
So
depending
my
on exactly what the
That's right.
situation is. People
That's
will
right.
and you go around to different masterminds. Some people will say, "Oh, Mike Fallon, he's a super stubborn guy.
Yeah.
He's just a
Yeah.
hard-headed
Yeah.
guy." But some people are like, "Oh, he's open-minded,"
Uh-huh.
depending on what the situation is. Great point.
That's right. So my case study, Mike, on that one was none other than Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A. So Truett's no longer with us, but he founded that way back in 1946, his first restaurant. But when I interviewed not only Truett Cathy way back in the day, and I just kept my notes and I used them in this book, but I interviewed his son, his executives, his president, his, VPs. You know what Dan Cathy, his son, said?
Hmm.
My dad was the most stubborn man I ever met and the most open-minded man I've ever met. So he was stubborn on the core, his core values, his core principles. And you know them. We're closed on Sunday. We're going to add value to people. We're going to serve the best chicken you can find anywhere. We're going to do this. But on everything else, even in his 90s, he was so open. I think he opened up a new restaurant when he was 92 years old, and he helped choose the menu and the wallpaper and the music. And it was called Truett's Luau. It was not even a Chick-fil-A. I'm telling you, that's the key. Know when to be stubborn, know when to be open-minded. Yeah.
Oh, so good. And you talked about how the moment you focus on your, development as a
Yes.
person, the
Yes.
money follows. And
Yeah.
if you just shift the perspective of, because I looked at I saw a certain amount of money that hit our account recently, and
Yeah.
it was substantial. And I thought to myself, You know what I look at that and equate that to? It's the amount of value that we offer to the
Yes,
marketplace.
yes,
And
yes.
maybe it is reliant on my ability to lead and manage and handle stress and all that. So I just need to focus on me more.
Yes,
Sounds
yeah.
selfish, but the better I become, the better I can help others around me, right? That's it.
Mike, yes. In fact, can I just double click, underscore, and highlight what you just said? It seems like an oxymoron, but if you work on you, everybody else benefits. It's just amazing. So let's get back to Truett Cathy for 1 minute. Truett Cathy embodied this. So I just mentioned if you think of Chick-fil-A listeners, you think of usually a few things, but one thing for sure, they are a fast food restaurant that's closed on Sunday.
Hmm.
That was one of Truett's values. Spend time with your family, spend time in worship. I'm not going to tell you who to worship or what family to spend time with, but you're going to do that's your day to take a Sabbath. For many fast food restaurants, Sunday is the #1 sales day of the week. It's a weekend day. But get this, Chick-fil-A closed on Sunday makes far more money than all the other fast food restaurants open 7 days a week.
Amazing.
So he made a decision about, that looked like the wrong decision monetarily, but it was actually the right decision in the end. I think I heard the average Chick-fil-A restaurant makes more than McDonald's, Subway, and Starbucks combined on a given week. Closed on,
Insane.
yeah. So it doesn't make sense. But folks, I'm telling you, the best leadership is going to be paradoxical.
Just think about the force that was coming his way to say we need to
Yeah.
stay open, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the
Oh, yeah.
board that was around him, the family members, and he was
Yes.
able to stick to his guns. God, I respect that.
I do too. He was known one time he heard that one of his Chick-fil-A owner operators was open on Sunday. He drove up and fired him.
Right?
Yes,
With no
I know.
tolerance, no
So I'm going,
tolerance.
well, I don't know if I would have done that, but I'm telling you. Anyway, I'm waxing eloquent. I don't need to talk anymore, but
God,
I just am so convinced leadership is an oxymoron, paradoxical thing that if we get the right stuff down, the rest of the stuff will follow eventually. Um, and it's not just a chase for money. Yeah.
yeah, and I guess maybe to tie in to something I said before, but every great leader creates great leaders. That's it,
Yes.
right? You
Yeah.
want leaders around you. I want
Right.
people to be able to solve problems. If they can't get a hold of me for a week, they don't
Yep.
need me. They're gonna
Yeah.
figure it out. All right. They're gonna
Yeah.
say, what would Mike do in this situation? Or,
Yep.
you know what, I'm gonna figure this out and hopefully it's the right solution. But to not rely
Hmm.
on me is
Hmm.
such an exciting characteristic. And
It
I
is the
think that if
best
you can
leadership.
create leaders around you, the
Yep.
organization will be way better off. But I want to get to, before we run out of time, the
Okay.
other book that came out in 2022 and is called A
Yeah.
New Kind of Diversity. Now, when I saw this, I looked into the details of it and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is what he's talking about
Yeah.
because uh, I mean, I was on a Zoom call on Tuesday with my team, and there's 9 people that we have these Zoom calls with. And I looked around. We have a 63-year-old woman.
Yep.
We have a 17-year-old kid that's looking at
Yes.
ads now. We
Yep.
have, I'm a 39-year-old guy. I mean,
Yep.
it is very diverse, but it's
Yeah.
amazing how the culture still bonds. We still joke around. And so there is a new kind of diversity. I don't know if
Yeah.
you could have done this 50, 60 years ago. So tell us a little bit about this book.
Yeah. It was so fun to do. And it's been something I've been simmering on for 2.5 to 3 decades. So, listeners, a new kind of diversity is not about ethnic diversity. We talk about that. Gender diversity, we talk about that. Income diversity, that's important too. It's about generational diversity. There are 4 and 5 generations coming to work together each day in America, across the country, and really the world now. And so I wanted to find a way to create a sort of encyclopedia, if you will, that whose job is not to stereotype, but to understand. How will I leverage those 30 somethings like Mike, or those 20 somethings that are part of Generation Z, or those 60 somethings that are part of the baby boomer generation? That's me. And I have found that we can turn our frustration with each other into fascination. And now we're pulling out the very best from those Gen Zers that show us how we can monetize TikTok, because I wasn't thinking about that. And in the book, I even tell that story. If we have time, let me tell a quick story. 3 years ago, Tony was a senior in college, got a part-time job at a paint store, a major retail brand paint store. And during that senior year of college, he also got on TikTok. Okay. Of course he did. And so he starts shooting videos and posting on TikTok of himself mixing paints at the paint store. And he'd put blueberries in white paint and make this vivid shade of blue. And well, Tony's account went viral. Once he got 1.8 million followers on TikTok, 37 million views, he thought to himself, oh my gosh, we could monetize this. This could be very helpful to this paint brand. We could get 2 million more, people buying paint from us. So Tony puts a slide deck together and asks to present it to the executives at this paint brand. Tony does not get one person to meet with him, doesn't get one set of eyeballs to look at his slide deck. Tony did get something he did not expect.
Hmm.
He got fired.
Oh,
They fired him because they thought this young whippersnapper was probably stealing the paint, or he was probably distracting to the customers, or, probably doing this on company time. You know how we get suspicious of people
yep.
not like us. So get this. Tony graduates. He's fired from the paint store, moves from Ohio to Florida, now has over 2 million followers, started his own paint store. Now, there's probably many things we don't understand about this story, but here's one thing I do understand. That older generation missed completely an opportunity they had they listened instead of judged. And I'm just saying, I'm hoping this book, A New Kind of Diversity, really creates an openness, a bridge instead of a wall between generations who are often colliding instead of collaborating at work. Yeah.
And to tie in your other book, it does start with the leader or leaders in the organization, right?
Mhm.
The way I look at it, I kind of equate it to a Dr. Joe Dispenza quote: "Your personality creates your personal reality." So the
Yeah.
moment you put your personality out there, you're going to attract like-minded people
Yep.
and individuals, whether they're 63, 65, 18 years old.
Yeah.
If there's an aspect of their personality that resonates with that leader,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
going to believe and trust that person more.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, you might have people from all different backgrounds, but they are all bonded by that personality. There's a
Yeah.
few characteristics. So it's weird how I've noticed that, this individual who comes from Arizona or California is able to have a normal conversation with somebody who's 50 years younger who lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And it's
Yeah.
probably because I put my personality out there in
Yeah.
full
Yeah.
force. So, do
Yeah.
you think that that's where it all starts? The leader has to showcase core values and personality for you to attract the right people, for them to actually bond together and trust each other.
Yeah, I absolutely, I believe you attract who you are, not who you want, darn it,
Yeah, right.
and I really do believe that this means you're authentic. Um, I had a college student say something to me years ago that I've never forgotten. He said, Dr. Elmore, the only thing worse than being uncool is being unreal. And I really believe that's true. Any generation, be who you are, but be the best version of who you are. And so yeah, I that's to your comment. Yeah,
Oh, I'm going to use that. That is a
yeah.
great quote. Who said that? We got to give that kid credit.
Yeah, it's a university student that's long graduated since that time. But I really took that to heart because I at that point I gave up trying to be the cool dude. As I got older, my kids don't need me to be cool. My employees don't need me to be cool. They need me to be real and be who I am and add that value to the company and then let them play that card they have. Yeah.
Oh, it's great. It's a great quote. Guys, take that and run with it, man. I think as time goes on, we're living in a world that seems fake on social media. And if you are
Yeah.
real and people see you on social media, and maybe you're not as
Yeah.
flashy as others, but if they meet you in
Yeah.
person and it's the same person, right?
Yes.
There's a
Yeah.
one-to-one ratio. They like you, they trust you more, they respect you more. So be real. Outside of your own book or books, is there one that stands out in your life as a defining moment? This is something we ask all of our guests. And I bring up Rich
Yeah.
Dad Poor Dad because it changed my life.
Yeah.
So
Love
is there
that book.
anything like that for you?
I read a book 2, 3 years ago that I'm recommending to everybody. It's a book called From Strength to Strength by Arthur Brooks. Arthur is a Harvard prof. In fact, he's the most popular professor at Harvard University. But he's like the guy next door. He's just very warm and real. But this book is about how to transition to the second phase of your life. Mine could be perfect for you at 39. It's about the second half. And you don't just double down and work harder at what you did in your 20s. You repurpose, who am I supposed to be now? It was so refreshing, so joyful for me.
Hmm.
And so anyway, that book was just phenomenal, and I recommend it to just about anybody I meet who's trying to figure out transitions. Yeah,
Beautiful. Yeah, from strength
yeah,
to strength. And I agree with you. There's that great quote out there. You basically you fail in your 20s, or you try in your 20s, you learn in your 30s, you earn in your 40s, or
yeah,
something along those lines. But
yeah.
I believe every decade should require a different version of you.
Yes,
So
yeah. That's a brilliant statement, Mike. That's
and
good.
and I think that people who are playing the same game over and over, they're going to get the same outcome. And I think that
Yeah,
you need to
yeah.
level up. So from strength to strength, I got to check that out. I don't know much about it, but
Good, good.
uh, in addition to the books, is there a social media channel or a website people can find you on that you're very active?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn, at Tim Elmore. That's where I am. Instagram and Twitter or X and Facebook at Tim Elmore is how you can find me. But I'd love to stay in touch with listeners that want to talk about these kinds of things. This is what I tend to talk about. Want to help people be a better themselves, a better leader, better at connecting with others to get the job done that needs to be done. Yeah.
I went to your website. It's timelmore.com. Is that right?
Yep. That's right. Yeah. That,
It's
in fact,
really
I'm
well done. Really well done.
good.
So, guys, if
Thank
you're
you.
looking to hire you or your company, right? They could hire
Yep.
you or your company
Yep.
to help out with leadership. Is
Yep.
that right?
Yeah. TimElmore.com. Yeah. Thanks,
Beautiful.
Mike.
Yeah, make sure you guys check that out. And I would love to have you back on. Maybe you could do a presentation within the $1 Million Circle. What you're saying really resonates. You're a great communicator. And obviously, you've been around the best with Maxwell. So it's going to rub off on you. And it was an honor to have you here,
Absolutely.
sir. I really appreciate you talking with us today, sharing your wisdom, and allowing me to talk about psychology and personal development and leadership.
Yep.
I think everybody would gain from this. So thanks so much,
Good.
man.
Mike, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Remember, guys, $1 Million Book will lead to $1 Million life.